Hey guys, Aaron here, coming at you with a knife review. This is the Lionsteel SR-1. It is a frame lock folding knife made by the company Lionsteel in Maniaggio, Italy. In 2010, they kind of took Blade Show rather, by storm, and when they won the most innovative imported design. And since then, Lionsteel has gained a lot of recognition for kind of subcontracting and manufacturing other companies' knives. Most notably, DPX, Hest, and Polforce are the ones that I know of. I'm sure there are others. But the SR-1 was designed by Moletta, which you can see right there on the blade. And from my understanding, he is one of the primary knife designers for Lionsteel, and he's working on several other designs with them right now. The SR-1 is an interesting folding knife because it is fairly large, but it has a couple of features on it that I think are really cool. Most notably are the roto block, kind of this steel insert on the frame lock, and the fact that it is an integral, or as Lionsteel calls it, a monolithic knife. That means this is the handle, the purple, is all one piece of metal that's been milled out and cut to perform its necessary functions in the knife. It also has a convex ground blade, and we'll talk more about the blade and the roto block here in a little bit. But those are some of the things that kind of set it apart from just another tactical or gentleman's folding knife. But just sort of some overall specs. It comes in two versions: the titanium, which this is, and then the aluminum. The aluminum is about half the price of the titanium versions. The only difference being is that it's D2 blade steel. This is the Sleipner blade steel. And the handle scales are obviously made out of aluminum versus titanium. I think there's a small weight difference, but not much. Otherwise, the knives are pretty similar, so you're really just paying for the materials and some different finish options. If you were considering getting a Lionsteel, I'm just going to say this up front, if you were considering getting a Lionsteel but were unsure about whether or not you should buy the titanium or the aluminum, and the $400 or so price tag for the titanium was a little out of your range, I would encourage you to just go ahead and go with the aluminum just right up front. It's a great knife, and I think you'll like it quite a bit. The knife itself is 8¼ inches long with a 3½ inch blade. The integral handle, it sort of tapers in the middle and swells a little bit, so it's roughly about 45 thou or 450 thou here, and it sort of swells to 575 thou here. The knife weighs about 6.5 ounces, and I believe that the aluminum is slightly lighter than that. And it is a 178 thou thick blade of the Sleipner steel. And the Sleipner steel is really, really interesting. The manufacturer calls it a modern version of D2, and it has some better machinability, polishing principles, edge retention, all that stuff. I took this to a guy locally to sharpen it for me because of the fact that it's convex, and I'm not super competent on how to do that myself. And the guy said he was actually really impressed when he was sharpening it. It has a very fine grain, and the wire edge, the burr that it formed was very, very fine, and he was really interested in it. But the composition of the blade is primarily chromium and molybdenum, both of which lend themselves to edge retention and strength. The molybdenum helps the blade in terms of corrosion resistance, so you shouldn't really have a problem with that, especially with the coating on it. But if you get one without the DLC, it should still be perfectly fine. Of course, you should take care of your blades, but just one less thing you have to worry about. Overall ergonomics, the knife is a very non-aggressive knife to handle. The scales are relatively slick. They have sort of this ridged texture to them, but I wouldn't say that it's overly aggressive. What lends itself to a positive grip is kind of this front choil here that's formed in the handle, and sort of this rear down curve along here. And what that does, as you can see, is it really just sort of seats the knife into your hand. It also has this subtle thumb ramp with jimping, and the jimping is fairly sharp and very functional. It really, I mean, my thumb will not slip off that. Like it's really digs in there, and I don't feel like I'm going to drop this knife at all, or that it could slide out of my hands. It's a very positive grip. The pocket clip is something that I think is kind of interesting. The only other knife company I know of that makes such a small form pocket clip is Southern Grind on their Bad Monkey knives. But I really like this because, being a lefty, this allows me to put the clip on the presentation side of the knife, and it's not this giant thing that's taking up the side of the knife. Totally an aesthetic thing, but I really dig it. I've actually talked to a couple of custom makers citing this example as a clip I would like to have on a right-handed knife that they were willing to tap for me lefty. So that's kind of cool. Good selling point. Love the clip. It's worth pointing out that it actually fits pretty tight too, but the slick handles, you're not going to shred your pockets or anything. You're just going to have a very secure and positive fit. Deployment and lockup. Pretty standard. This knife is a thumb stud deployed knife. There's no flipper, obviously. I have found the mechanism on mine to be fairly tight. This isn't a knife that you're going to flick out. Now you could, you can't, like with a good wrist flick, I have to do that off camera, with a good wrist flick you can flick that knife out. But let's see if I can do it here. Can't do anything on camera, right? Jeez. Whatever, you get it. So what I have come to do is I open this knife much like you would a Sabenza, just sort of like that, just a push and a pivot on the thumb stud, and it works fine. I find that flicking a big knife like this out, especially with the sound that lock makes to engage, to be a little overly flashy and noisy, so I don't really worry about it. The lockup, as you can see, is strong and relatively early. There is no movement whatsoever. Completely solid, frankly, as you would expect on a knife of this price point. The roto block is this thing here. And what this does is this functions as a lock bar stabilizer, kind of like a Hinderer knife would have, and it also is a lock. So what I can do is, with the knife locked open now, I can turn this. And what that does is it prevents me from being able to move the lock bar back over, converting the knife into a fixed blade. When I got it, I wanted to fuss with it, but it's kind of gimmicky. I'll never use this. I have never used this in any practical sense other than just messing with it. I wouldn't trust this to keep the knife from failing in any way. The blade is still held in there by a pin. It's not a solid piece of metal. So, unless you're doing something that could intentionally cause the lock bar to move so that it unlocked, I don't really see much of a purpose, especially with how strong and positive of a lock you have on this knife. Other than that, it's kind of neat. It's a neat design. Without saying anything else about it, it's just kind of a neat design. But anyway, and then this is the steel insert here. You can see it's held in there by 2 torque screws. And what that does is it sort of prevents the titanium from wearing away when it contacts the blade tang, and doesn't, basically the knife won't age as fast. The lockup will stay early, if you will. And it's also a replaceable part, so should the knife start to lock up late, I'm guessing you could send it into Lionsteel and they would just replace the insert. I haven't found anywhere where you can buy new inserts, so I don't think that's a user serviceable part. But it's kind of neat. I've never seen that done before. So, the blade shape is a very steep belly drop point. It kind of reminds me of the Hoback knife and how steep of a drop point that was too. But it's got a lot of belly, great for utility. Great for chopping, great for slicing. Probably not so great for stabbing, but just like any other knife, if you really put the heave-ho behind it, it's going to stab just fine. I found that the Sleipner steel retained an edge perfectly. I took it and had it sharpened, and it came back very sharp, but that was simply because I bought this secondhand, and I don't think it was as sharp when I received it. Now it's very, very sharp. And then it's convex ground. And for those of you that don't know, most knives, the blade edge is like this, the V, sort of V bevel, you know, in varying degrees depending on how the knife is made. But a convex is essentially like this, roughly. And what that does is I've found it keeps the edge a little bit longer because there is more steel behind the bevel itself to kind of, you know, to back it up. It's not as such of a weak point. It also has less friction on it due to the curves of the edge. And a great way to test this would be is if you have a convex knife and a traditional V-grind knife or beveled knife, go get a piece of cheese and slice it with both knives, and you'll feel the convex knife go through smoother. It's a great edge. I'm toying with the idea of convexing all of my knives, but I probably won't do that, just being honest. So, in conclusion, I think this knife is fantastic. I think it's very sort of trim and unique kind of knife that you would carry, very techy in a way. In my written review, I said it seems like something like a space-age gentleman, like Lando Calrissian or something like that would carry. It's got that feel to it. There's a lot of different handle color options you can get with it. And to be honest, just the fact that it's an integral is reason enough to get one. There aren't any other, to my knowledge, there aren't any other production companies that make integral folders. The only other place you can get them are custom makers, and they are expensive. They are difficult for custom makers to make, and you know, you got to get on a waiting list. Now you can just order a Lionsteel. So I think it's really, really great. And yeah. And then the knife comes packaged. I'm sure some of you guys know this. In a wooden box, you have your adjustment tool here that will take on and off the pocket clip, which will go here. It's also the pivot adjustment tool. The knife sits right in there. Kind of cool. Nice little touch. Yeah, that just about wraps up my review, guys. For a more in-depth written review, check out practicallyeveryday.com. If you're looking at purchasing a Lionsteel, there's a link on my written review that you can use to buy from Blade HQ. You'll be helping to support me and my channel and my blog, and I think it would be really great. It's a fantastic knife. I couldn't recommend it more. I am very glad to be reviewing it, to own one. It's something I've wanted for a long time. So, that's it. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Looking forward to your comments.